Welcome to The Interview, where we share inspiring career stories and advice from experts and thought leaders on any and all topics, everything from college admissions tips to the latest medical and self-care advice. I'm host Leslie Heaney, and I'm excited to share these compelling stories with you. I hope you'll learn something new and hopefully share a few laughs along the way. On today's episode, we're talking with celebrated literary agent and one of my favorite people, Elisabeth Weed. Elisabeth is going to give us a glimpse into the world of book publishing, from discussing her own journey working for a publishing house, to launching her own agency, to teaming up with other women in the industry to create the incredibly successful agency, The Book Group. The Book Group was formed in 2015, and since then it's been a real juggernaut in the publishing world. Elisabeth's and the Book Group's clients include award-winning novelists and illustrators, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists, and dozens of New York Times bestsellers. Elisabeth is fascinating, has the best sense of humor, and knows what it takes to make a successful book. And now with that, here's Elisabeth Weed. I was laughing with my last guest that, do you remember the SNL skit where the two ladies were doing the nature talk and then they would go up and do...
And that's how I feel right now. Or like sweaty balls.
I was going to say it's the sweaty balls interview. But
I'm try not to talk like that.
I know. And as you mentioned, you have a bit of a head cold, but I like this decibel level for your voice.
I do
It's very
too.
Demi Moore.
It's got a little scratch to it. I sound sort of like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, you do. And I know you do, which I'm very excited about talking to you about all the different things that you know. But I want to take it back to the beginning, your beginning. Where did you grow up? What is the origin of Elisabeth Weed?
Yes, good question. I was born and raised in New York City, where we are right now. And I think I've always had a love of reading. I think there was always a book in my hand. I would grab anything from, Portnoy's Complaint from my parents' shelf because I heard there were dirty parts to it.
I was more Judy Blume's Forever on that.
Yes. So I was going to say Judy Blume. I was a child of the 80s. So Judy Blume, V.C. Andrews. I have parents say to me, "Oh, my kid is reading all this junk." I'm like, I don't think it matters what they read. As long as they're reading, they will love books and they'll come to the better stuff as they get older. And I am a testament to that because I can read high and low and kind of love like a large swath of different genres because I just read
so much. So I know you went to Brearley here in the city.
Yep, I went to Brearley, and then I went, I think my mother was like, you are 80 pounds and you're wearing some tiny little dress and trying to go out in Manhattan, so I'm sending you to boarding school, which she did. And so I went to Choate for 4 years, and then I went to Kenyon College in Ohio, which has a really wonderful English department. I was really drawn to that. They have the Kenyon Review, where I interned. They have a terrific creative writing course, several of them actually, and I think that's actually where sort of my desire to sort of move from what I thought I wanted to do, which was be a writer, to going on to the editorial agent side. I was accepted into a creative writing course. It was like one of 10 people, and most of us were seniors. There was this one guy who was a sophomore, and he was the only one who could write. And his name is John Green, who you probably know of.
Wow, stop it.
Yes, and he, we would workshop our stories all the time, and I thought, well, A, I can't write like him, but B, I like editing him, and I like thinking about this from this other side.
So was the Kenyon Review like a magazine?
A literary magazine, yeah. This was separate, though. This was just a creative writing class that I did my senior year. But, he was really, you could just tell, like he had it. And the rest of us maybe could get there, but I really discovered my love of kind of editing and sort of thinking about how to position a book. What is this book? And that sort of led me to look at jobs in the publishing field.
So when you were, have you stayed in contact with him, by the way?
Well, it's actually very funny. I can out him now because this was outed in the New Yorker a couple of years ago. But, again, it was mostly senior women in this class, some men. he was the sort of lone sophomore. And if you know him, like he's sort of dorky looking and like amazing. And he would just come in and just talk about how he couldn't get a date, how he, just wanted a girlfriend. And, as those...
Is he now dating Giselle? I mean, are you about to do a reveal? Oh, really?
Well, Yes, but this is even worse because he wrote a short story one week. He came in with a short story, and it was about two teenagers having sex. At the end of the reading, the professor looked at him and said, "John, you've never been laid." And we were like, "Don't do that to this poor guy. He's just trying so hard." And so we kind of all were like mother hens around him, and we're trying to like be protective of him. And I ran into him several years later at BEA, which is a big book fair. And he had this beautiful wife. And I said, "I don't think you have the same problem anymore." And we laughed about it. So it was really,
that is so great.
Yes.
And I just, if you might hear a little jingle, that Elisabeth has a beautiful gold bracelet on.
Did it jingle?
Well, the nice man who's helping us with our headphones and our...
Oh, I can take those off.
Sweaty balls talk. No, don't take it off. It adds a little, it's like a...
I'm a hand talker. I get teased by my entire family every time. I'm a gesticulator. So there we go.
Right back at you. So you graduated from Kenyon. You decided, or you learned, I guess, while you were there that writing perhaps wasn't going to be the thing that you wanted to pursue, but editing...
Yes.
Was. And so what was your next step? What was your start coming out of college?
Well, my next step was to apply to a bunch of jobs as a, editorial assistant. At the time, I think the starting salary was $20,000. And I was trying to sort of figure out how to make that work, with an apartment and having a life. And I couldn't figure that out. So I took a job, it's kind of embarrassing, but I took a job at Bergdorf Goodman in their buying department. I was like, I like clothes, so maybe that's what I'll do. And Did you get a discount? I did get a discount, so that was great. But I was so miserable. I had a boss who, my brother jokes that I could have written like Devil Wears Prada because he had me like chained to my desk in case, some designer called, no half-day Fridays in the summer, all of that. And, it was one of those things that I knew early on that I didn't like. And I remember actually I was reading a novel under my Women's Wear Daily because nobody even read like the New York Times in this little group. They really read Women's Wear Daily. Right. And I was like, these are not my people, and that's okay. They're great people. They're just not my people. And so I stayed there for a year because my father said, you can't quit your first job for a year. It looks bad. Even though I don't actually know if that is advice I would give my kids now, but I stuck it out. And then I actually didn't know what a literary agent did. I kind of only knew about the publishing side. I didn't understand that there were authors also had agents to help them, on their career, help them sell the book, help them market it, kind of like a actor's agent, if you will. And I met somebody who worked in that field and just started applying and got a job at Curtis Brown. Yeah. And that was it. That was sort of my start.
So you were at Curtis Brown, and then at what point did you decide that because you went from there to going out on your own, right? Is that
so? I went. No, I had a sort of a few jumps along the way. I ended up at a bigger agency called Trident.
Okay.
And at a certain point, because of the way the business works, as an agent, if I sell your book for $100,000, let's say, I get a commission on that. Agents take 15% commission. And at a certain point, you're selling these books and you're starting to see what you're bringing in. And if you're on a salary at a big agency, you're starting to think, wait, I could do more on my own. This isn't fair. Like the math is not adding up. And of course, they're paying for your office and, all of your expenses and that kind of thing. But when I was an assistant at Curtis Brown, I had become really close with some other assistants, and we would go out for drinks and, talk about our terrible bosses and, our problems and this, that, and the other. Would say, one day we should go into business together. And it was very much sort of that pipe dream. But then we kind of continued on our own. Some agents went out on their own, and I did. I had Weed Literary for
I remember that
4 years. Out of our tiny apartment in the city. But it was successful enough that I was really building a name for myself, and as were these three friends of mine, Julie Bear, Brittany Bloom, and Faye Bender, and we just decided.
Now, were they also out on their own at that point, or were they still?
Julie and Faye had gone out on their own, and Brittany was at a bigger agency set in Boston and based in Boston, and we had all been approached by bigger agencies, but having been at a big agency, I just in my soul, I didn't want to be at a big corporate company. I feel like the nature of agenting is so personal. It's so one-on-one. I feel like it's that relationship you have with that author and that editor. I didn't see the benefit of being in a big corporation for, to do those things. And I think we sort of all had that same ethos. And we were nervous about joining forces because we were four friends.
Yeah.
So 10 years ago, we moved in together before we got married. We got office space together. We're like, how's this going to work?
By the way, that's brilliant.
Yes.
That is, because sometimes it's even if you share, it's sort of like we have very close friends that we adore, but we know we're not vacation compatible with them because they are, whatever it is, they're not going to be ready for the reservation. Maybe their kids, are screaming at the table. Know that now. And now we know this. Great friends, but we're not, vacation compatible.
Right.
You getting that kind of test drive is brilliant.
Absolutely, because we could have moved in together and thought, or gotten married and thought, oh, wait, we actually don't have the same values about how to run a company. And it's four women running a company with equal say. I will tell you here, it's, besides marrying Matt and having my children, it's the best decision I ever made. I mean, it's been great. And we're, it's officially 8 years in June after we did our little 2-year sort of living together. And I feel like I learn something every day. I feel like we build our agency. We've just hired another agent. We're continuing to grow. We've had a lot of success in the marketplace. And, I'm excited to do it for the next 10 years.
Do you think so when you all came together, you obviously knew these women very well. Was there sort of a common goal or ethos that the four of you had about how you wanted to approach running an agency? You mentioned sort of the personal touch of not wanting to be at a bigger agency, or was there a certain genre of books that you were looking to, or certain voices you were looking for? Was there any common theme there, or was it just...
Absolutely, and I think it is the author care. It is first and foremost. I mean, we take a lot of time, developing. We do a lot of editing on our books before we go out with them, and we don't take on just anything. There is a certain not type of book, because we do a lot of different genres, but a quality, I think, that we look for in our authors. And I would say, just going back to the large corporations, I do think at some of those places, then, so-and-so's uncle has a book, can you sort of take it on kind of thing? Like we can really choose what we want to do, and we're really protective of having that freedom to do that.
And I would think, I'm not an author, but I play one on TV, or I'd love to be one day. I would think it'd be so appealing for an author to know that they're having that level of care and that really astute eye. You're looking at all the authors that you represent and how you all have approached your business. That would be it's so attractive, right? I
hope so.
Yeah.
That's the goal. And I think, just to add to that, it's also the collaboration. When I'm negotiating a new deal, my three partners are all part of that conversation. Or a cover letter that is going out with a new novel, I pass it by Brittany, who is the queen of cover letters, to just give it a once over. Or, if I'm out having lunch with an editor, they'll say, oh, will you tell her about this book? So there really is kind of that brain trust. So it's not just each of us individually, but...
You're all bringing your superpower.
I think
to the
so.
table.
And we all have different superpowers, and that's sort of fun.
That's great.
Yes.
So tell me, the process. So obviously you had authors that you were already working with when you were at bigger firms, then you went out on your own. And then do authors just find you? Now, of course, you guys are so established, but in the beginning, people were finding you through word of mouth, or were you, I guess, when people write a manuscript for their book, that's how it works, I guess. Yeah. Well, I want you to tell me how it works, actually.
You know.
But,
that's it.
But, are they, do they send it sort of out to a broader group, or they're looking, and then do you have to then kind of convince them that you're the right fit for them, or?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I would say just, when you're starting out as an agent, because we have some junior agents in our agency, and we love them because, well, first of all, they bring a different energy, a different point of view to the business, and a younger sensibility, which is helpful. And, when my computer breaks, they can fix it.
Please. I mean,
they like to give me a hard time, but that's okay. I offer them things in return.
I was on a Zoom on Sunday afternoon with, I'm almost 50, as you know. I was the youngest of the group, and the lady who had set it up. I mean, it was as if you had videotaped us about press this button. I mean, we need the under 35 set to be in our lives.
My Zoom's not
at all.
on.
Yeah,
yes,
at
all
all
of
times.
Those things. But for them, they're starting to get their own submissions in. I would say a lot of them are going to conferences where authors can meet them and they'll do things like these pitch wars, I think they're called, where an author it's like dating, but they sit down with an agent.
Like a Shark Tank.
They sit down with an agent, and they have like 10 minutes to tell them about the book, and then the agent will say, yeah, I'd like to read that kind of thing. So it's just an opportunity for authors to get in front of agents. But I would say in today's day and age, with the World Wide Web, as us old fogies call it, I mean, authors really can find us, and I feel like it's pretty easy to, my advice to authors is always to look at the back of the acknowledgement pages of a book that they've read, that they love, that they think their book is similar to, find out who that agent is and reach out to them. I just think there's so many resources online. But to answer your second question, yes, they would send a query letter. They can send it to as many agents as they want. And I think the biggest misunderstanding is that, I'll never find an agent, but agents really are looking for stuff. I still read my slush pile, which is what I call I have a separate file for a separate email where my queries go. But I'll look at it at night, or if I'm waiting for the train, and just go through and I'll request things. I think now it's rare that I take on something new, but I'm still always looking. I want to
discover that next.
Yes, absolutely.
John Green.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So with that though, so you have people send. How many? You must be like the admissions office at Harvard. How many people?
We don't respond to all. We have something on our website that says we can't respond to all of it. If it will be read, and if we like it, we'll respond to it, kind of thing.
But what for people that are looking that aren't represented, and they want to? Is it the catchy note in the subject line, or how do they stand out in your slush pile?
It's so subjective, right? Fiction is so subjective. I do mostly fiction, but I would say a really well-crafted pitch letter reads a lot like jacket copy on a novel. So I'm looking at plot. I'm looking at their bio. Have they been published in various reviews? I don't really care about an MFA. I think, of course, that shows that they have taken their craft seriously. But I think for me, it really is story first, and story and paired with good writing, and something that I haven't heard before, something that feels fresh. And I can't tell you how many books I get that sound really similar to something that's already out there, and that's just hard to do.
So how do you then, and I guess it could be in your slush pile, but are you looking to, how do you find sort of new authors and new voices, or at this point they're finding you?
At this point they're finding me, and it'll come through referrals from other authors or sometimes from editors.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that'll happen. I just signed a woman recently who I met through Whitney Chatterjee, who you know.
Yeah.
She's a mom friend of hers from school, and she'd written one book, unagented, and I just fell in love with it, and we're now working together. So it can really come, it really can come from anywhere. That doesn't usually work. Usually when a friend says, oh, my friend wrote a book.
Oh, I mean, please.
Right.
I can, I started this, well, I'm not going to get a sidebar, but people send me their ideas for screenplays or ideas for TV series, for a sort of separate life of mine. And it's hilarious. It's like, I've got a friend whose mom, I mean, it's really, I can't even, I'm not even, I mean, I am sort of a side.
So what do you do with that? Because I was just talking to my colleague. We were both lamenting the fact that, we've had some people come and say, oh, could you just, it's usually my mother saying, oh, can you read? And I said, well, you read it first and tell me what you think. That's been my way to buffer it a little bit, just because I only have so much time in the day.
What about your junior agents? Could it be like when I looked at a law firm, when I was a lawyer, the associates, we do all the stuff that the partners don't want to do. Maybe they can do like a 100%. Quick read and give you a summary.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And we do have that implemented. It's just hard if sometimes somebody wants to talk to you, kind of thing.
Yes, and you've got the cliff notes are not as detailed. But what did you think of that one part when she gets off the train? That might be a tough one to respond to. How would I? It's interesting asking me back the question. I think it's terrific. We're not focused on that genre right now, or we have a lot of sorry. But how do you, for people that do you have any circumstances where you're representing authors? How do you, once you have an author that's working with you, do they come to you when they're thinking about writing their next book and kind of tell you, or how does that work? How does the relationship continue beyond
the one book?
The one book, yeah. I
mean, that's the best kind of author. And I would say most of my authors are on their second, third, fourth, fifth book. And that, to me, is the best part of my job, is when an author who's been working and building an audience hits the New York Times list, say, on their third book, or gets a Jenna pick or something like that, some kind of thing that really makes them feel like, I always want to be an added value.
Yeah.
And so if I can, it's not just about selling the first book, it's about talking about the career. And one of the first questions I ask authors when I'm thinking about signing them and they're thinking about signing with me is, what are your hopes and dreams? What is the career that you look at and say, I want that? Because that's really telling to me. Is it more of like a prize-worthy kind of thing? Or do I want to, is it more of a Colleen Hoover, I want to sell billions of copies? And, it could be both. And obviously you can't make all of those come true, but it's just helpful to know what the goal is and then to try and help get them there.
I love that. I mean, Jenna's picks, she's been doing,
she's amazing.
She's the new Oprah's.
She's amazing. And she's picked a number of our books. And they're all great. All the book clubs are great. But I just think she does such a good job of picking a little bit outside of the box and sort of the obvious book and bringing different voices
I agree.
To her readership, which I appreciate.
I agree with that. So you have you have tons of really, really successful authors, but you have some also that have turned their stories into hit series and movies. Celeste Ng's Little Fires Everywhere, people I know have all heard of course, and Big Little Lies. Is it Leon Moriarty or Lion?
It's Leon. You did say it right. Like Leon what is it? Leon the Lion?
Maybe.
I had to remember that because I kept saying Leanne.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was like tomato, but it's Leon.
It's Leon. You got it right. And she's such a great story. Faye is her agent, and I love Leon. I've loved her books from day one, but that's an example of an author who was writing, I think she had 3 books when The Husband's Secret, which was the book that came before Big Little Lies, came in, and the publisher and Faye both read it and said, this is the breakout book. This is the book. And so they kind of positioned it as the breakout book. It sold a lot of copies and then helped take her to that next stratosphere. And of course, it was a Reese pick, and
amazing.
She was in the I think the series just took it to a whole nother level.
So what does that process look? So that's something where Faye just knew did she know that particular book would be something that would translate so well onto a screen, or I'm assume that you have people that are reaching out to you often looking for content.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And, these things do change. And, we're constantly having film and television agents and producers and studios in our office. And, right now they're like, we want the next Succession. We're like, okay, and so there's a little bit of, whatever's working, then they're like, we want that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we work with a number of agents that, are willing to, try different things because you never know. I think with that was, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe that came from Reese, who read it and saw it and wanted to star in it and has her own production company and was really able to make that work.
But that's interesting what you just said about, so agents are coming to you saying we want the next big Succession. When you're looking at your slush pile, do you ever think, gosh, that's a really interesting story that would translate well, and maybe the writing isn't, maybe it's not, Elisabeth Weed level, but it could translate well in those genres. Do you ever?
100%. I think I probably do that more. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think that way. I think I'm often pitching in film terms. I have a book that I'm getting ready to go out with, and I have some book comps to it, but my real comps are Jason Bourne, female Jason Bourne meets. It's like I can't help it. Like I think I love movies. I'm a TV addict, so I can't help think in those terms.
Oh,
And I just got something in that's, everybody's talking about AI, but this is like a really fun kind of feminist heist AI book. And it's not totally there yet, but I can see it. And so that's something I'm very excited about because I've spoken to the author and we've talked about how we can get the book sort of to the next level. But that feels very cinematic to me. It's like a Killing Eve, but set in the AI world.
Oh, so that's really interesting too, what you just said to me about sort of so you'll get the manuscript, right? Which would be a chapter or a section, remind me. And then you're going to get you're going to have their kind of cover letter that goes with it, right? Which gives you a little flavor of what's inside. You can then go back to an author and say, I love your plot. I like what you did here, but you need to.
Here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't do that all the time. But in that case, I thought there was something really worthwhile in the pages. And I thought it's worth a phone conversation to see if she agrees with me. And so I sort of laid out my general thoughts about an edit, and it really resonated with her. So she's going to go back. And I have the whole book. When you query, I don't know how other agencies work, but you send a query letter in the first 10 pages. And I read those 10 pages. I thought they were great. I requested the whole manuscript. I thought the rest of the book needed some shaping. Set up a time to talk with her. And, if she wants to think about it, but I think she's excited to do the work because it's a lot of work, but I think it's work that will pay off.
Well, I mean, she's relying on you,
Yeah,
right?
And she said that. She's like, I really want this kind of feedback. And as she said, you get what's at the core of the story. And I don't want to change any of that. I just want to, I'm a real plot person, and I think the plot needs to really just be ramped up.
Well, how many times have you read a book or watched a series where like, it's great, and then something just
throws you off.
Goes off piece, and you're like, how do we get here?
How do we get
see
here?
Him dying, and I don't, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Being that he was the most attractive person, and that whatever it is, or just doesn't seem, the plot doesn't seem to really work itself through in the way that you'd like it to. I also think it's really interesting the editor piece. So does an editor work with you kind of at that juncture too, or will you have an author finish their manuscript, then it goes to an editor and they kind of fine tune the language, or how does that process work?
Agents, I think historically, we're not doing a lot of editing. That's changed, at least since I've grown up in the business. I do 1 to 2 pass-throughs, like kind of a macro edit, and then sort of a micro edit, second edit. I don't think I have more than like 3 reads in me before I start to lose sight of things.
Yeah.
So I do say to authors, if I'm speaking at a conference or something, before you go out with that book, like, give it to a beta reader, put it in a drawer, and don't look at it for a month and then come back to it. Like, just get it in the best place you think you can get it before it goes to the agent, because they only have so many reads in them. And then, and once that's ready to go, that's when I would go out to editors at different publishing houses. And typically you submit it to, anywhere between 10 and 20 editors, and you hope, the goal is to get the book to as many editors that you think might be right for the book. But the real goal is, the real goal in making all those changes and editing is you want to have as few people turn it down because they think it needs work, right? Because you want to give your author as many options. So I don't see a downside to doing that extra work. I think it helps on the flip side because you just have more opportunity when editors make offers.
So they'll come back. So the publishing, let's say you send it out to 10 publishing houses and 5 get back, or maybe that's a high number, whatever number get back. And then they'll say to you, we'd like to offer you this. We see this author in this way. This is how we'd market it. Mm-hmm. This is who would do the book cover. Or this is who, is it that detailed? Do you go back to your author and kind of present the different?
Absolutely. You typically, hopefully, it's you have a lot of interest, and you set what's called a closing, and you ask for those offers to come in on a certain time. There are different ways you can sort of set the auction up. But yes, they present their best offer, and it doesn't. I mean, it can vary. I mean, usually it's really focused on the sort of the financial piece of it, the format of the book. Is it hardcover? Is it trade? When are they thinking of publishing it? What season? And often they'll add some marketing, bells and whistles. And often I've also put them on a call or a Zoom with the editor because I think it's really important for the author and the editor, who are really going to work closely together, to feel simpatico. So we'll do calls, and sometimes the editor will bring their marketing and publicity team in to, if they're really excited about it and really want to woo an author, they'll bring more of their team. So it's a number of different ways it can go. But again, my job is to bring as many of those to the author as possible, and then work with the author to make, sometimes it's just obvious. It's like, well, that's obvious where we're going to go. And sometimes it's a little bit more nuanced.
And then sometimes you probably have to negotiate with those publishing houses about everything's terrific except for this one thing or this other thing.
Yes.
And then what themes or subjects do you think are sort of selling well today?
That's a good question. And I can tell you,
besides self-help, which I mean, you should see my nightstand. It's like,
is that what you're reading?
I mean, it's like, is it Untangle? I mean, it's even though my daughter's 17 and I still haven't untangled it.
Is that the Lisa D'Amour?
Yes.
Oh, she's amazing. I like her podcast.
There's this other book. God, who's the author? It's called A Short Guide to a Long Happy Life, which is about it's like everything from getting your bloods done to getting a colonoscopy to eating fiber.
I knew that book.
It's great.
Like marketed for every almost 50-year-old.
Well, how many? There's just so much to sift through. I mean, I just want someone to tell me what to do.
I'm with
you.
I
have that, and then of course I have tons of. I have Circe on my nightstand, one of your other books, and and then it's just a ton of. But anyway, so I know self-help is up there because particularly in our age group.
And actually, we have my colleague Brittany sold this book called The Body Keeps the Score many years ago. It's a book on PTSD, and in COVID, it popped up to #1 and has stayed at #1 ever since. So if that's telling you what people are needing right now, it's fascinating. The trend I am noticing is escapist. I think the news is so bad.
Yeah.
The world feels like it's going to hell. And I think what's really selling are like fun thrillers. I mean, the Emily Henry, I don't know if you know her. Your daughter probably reads her.
I do know her.
#1. She writes romantic comedies. They're light, they're fun. They sell like crazy. And I think it's escapist beach read kind of thing. But I also think there's a place. I mean, I think, we spend a lot of time studying the New York Times list, and I think at least on the fiction side of things, I think there are, it's like that kind of like book club fiction. It's like not too hard,
right.
It's not too esoteric, but it tells a really good story. You feel like you've learned something along the way. I just finished Demon Copperhead, which just won the Pulitzer by Barbara Kingsolver, which I loved. That's been doing incredibly well even before it won the Pulitzer. But I do think there's a trend toward the lighter stuff. There's a publisher called Berkeley who is having just like this banner year the last 2 years. And I asked the publisher, I was like, why do you think you're having such a good year? And they said, well, we've always been publishing these light, fun books, and now everybody actually wants them. And I thought that was a very...
Do you think that's a COVID?
I do.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I do. I think people want to escape. They don't want to... They want an escape from the realities of life. And if a book can sort of take you to a fun place, or thrillers, they'll always work because they still have that escapist element to them.
Also in COVID, I think having something that you can put down and go back to when you're being distracted by having to make a grilled cheese.
Exactly.
For people under the age of 20 multiple times a day. It's good to have something.
Make your own damn grilled cheese.
On the lighter side. We did I instituted Heaney life skills courses for the kids.
Amazing.
It lasted for about 48 hours. Where I was like,
Did it start with the grilled cheese?
It actually did. Grilled cheese was one, pancakes, laundry.
Laundry.
There was some cooperation, but some revolt. So there certainly are some.
Yeah, they're ready. They're ready to make that grilled cheese.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think we talked about this a little bit, but I am curious, do you feel like there's a demand, that there's certain authors, even your authors feel like do they feel like they are at all influenced you or interested in kind of writing books that they think would be good content? I mean, there's just the streaming services, there's so many, they're starving for content, and, being a big TV watcher who also is looking for the next Succession.
Right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I mean, the one thing I would just say to authors who do that is don't just write to the market, because if you do that, the market may change. But I think if you're already kind of in there anyway, you can push on it a little bit more. And it is nice to sell your book to film, even if it doesn't get made, to have an option and know that that's, first of all, it's another stream of revenue, but also you never know. I mean, I have things that have been optioned, and one day, you just don't know if it'll actually happen, but it could, and that's exciting,
right? And that also sometimes just depends on timing too, because while the market might be ripe for it when it was first optioned, maybe it's those streaming services are constantly trying. They're all trying to find new content.
Right. Well, reading was up, I want to say like 30% during COVID. I mean, we had our best year just in terms of sales, and now it's trickled down because people aren't stuck at home. I think it's gone down because people are finally out of their houses and doing other things. But yeah, streaming it's overwhelming right now. I mean, there's just so much, and I don't really know. I mean, I'm a little bit of a snob, and that I have HBO and Apple TV seem to have the best stuff. Yeah. But I've been known to watch Love is Blind. I'm not afraid to admit it.
You've gone...
I can go high-low.
You've explored all over, as I have.
Yes.
We can talk offline about some of our faves, our news faves. But if you had... What kind of recent discovery, or have you had a recent discovery of an author that you feel like is on their way to being the next Leon Moriarty, or that it isn't, that you've just discovered that you think... Oh,
somebody new that I've just discovered. I mean, I have several authors who are, on those, next books.
Or a new book that you think you want to tell everybody they need to read.
Well, I just signed this woman named Pia Chatterjee, who pitched her book to me as Big Little Lies meets Such a Fun Age. And it's set in San Francisco. It's about a woman, and her relationship with her babysitter who goes missing, and it deals with race, it deals with class, it's got a thriller element, but I feel like it kind of checks the boxes of all that sort of. And she's a really good writer. I mean, she's a legitimately really good writer and storyteller. She's somebody I just signed. I haven't even sold the book yet, but I have really high expectations for that. And then another author of mine who I've been working with for just over 10 years, because I signed her right before, almost 11 years, my daughter Poppy was born. She likes to remind me that I called her and I said, I can either read this really quickly, or it's going to have to wait 3 weeks until I have my baby. It's really on it. Her name's Ariel Lawhan, and she writes historical suspense. She's written Codename Helene was probably her best known book. It's about a true story of a woman in World War II spy, and it's really great. She also wrote I Was on a Stage about the Romanovs. Really twisty. She always plays with time and structure. And her book that's coming out in December is called The Frozen River. And again, she always takes a true person in history. She is writing about Martha Ballard, who was a midwife in Maine in the 1860s. She was one of the only women in her town who knew how to write. Her husband taught her how to write, and she kept a diary, which is now quite famous in its own right. But she also solved a murder. I mean, I don't know how she comes up with these stories, but she finds them and then just fictionalizes them in such a great way.
It's so funny. I bumped into this friend of mine. Her name is Jennifer Donnelly. I don't know if you know her work, but I'm trying to think of what books you would know that she's written. But I just bumped into her on Saturday. She was in the city, and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm taking a quilting class at FIT." And I said, "Are you researching for a new book?" And she said, "Yes." I mean, that's I don't know what she's writing, what her story is, but it's so she. I don't know how your author found.
Oh, she did about a year of research because it's really important in historical fiction to get those elements right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so she does. I think. At some point, I think she would because she also does such a good job at plotting and suspense. I think at some point she'd love to write something that's not historical, because I think it wouldn't be such a endeavor.
So Jennifer Donnelly's books, Stepsister, The Tea Rose, A Northern Light is probably her most popular on the New York Times bestseller list. But I just happen to know her because she lives in my town.
Right.
But anyway, I was really fascinated by the level of detail that the lengths that she goes to make sure she's getting it right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for those that are listening, or maybe those that are in the room with you who have a fantasy of some point writing their great American novel or their memoir, what advice do you have
for them?
For us folk, or for those that are listening?
Read as much as you can, read what's out there right now, and be diligent about, putting your butt in the chair every day. And if it's, if you can carve out however much time, just doing it. And I feel like it's so much of it is just having that, just, what is the word I'm looking for? Just being able to sit down and write every day, and just having that dedication to do that is half the battle, because, life can get in the way. You can say, oh, I'm too busy, this, that, and the other. But if you sit down every day, even if you write crap that day, something will break out open in that, whatever you've thrown up on the page, and the next day something will come together. So I would say just have like a really good schedule of putting the words to paper. But also, read as much as you can. I do think I have a number of authors who had started with writing groups, and I think they can be really beneficial because you're kind of held accountable.
Yeah.
It is a lonely business. And so if you can have a community of like-minded readers reading, championing your work, reading it, and I think holding you accountable to write that, those 30 pages before next week or whatever. is really beneficial.
Well, we know that's the struggle, right?
Yes.
Where Joan Wilder struggled with it. Paul Sheldon struggled with it. I mean, this is we've seen this on, we know that they have, their editors are always waiting for their next
Waiting
book.
for it. Oh, I know.
They have no
wanting
inspiration.
to pry it from their hands.
I know. So
not ready yet.
That's actually a friend of mine's husband who is in finance. He has been working on this book.
Oh, wow.
Historical fiction, kind of about Hyde Park and where we are. And, it's around the time of Roosevelt. Because anyway, and that's what he does. He just sets aside a time every day that he writes, even if it's, not great or he's not, he's writing 3 sentences. He just is putting the time in.
Right. And if it has to be, 5 to 6 before the kids are up or the job starts. I mean, I have an author who wrote an entire novel during swim practice. She just sat in her car and wrote it.
Stop it.
Yeah. And she's like, that was my time. So you just, I mean, listen, I can't do it. I'm so blown away by those that can. And, even if it's bad, just to sit down and have that dedication to writing a book with a beginning, middle, and an end is really, really impressive.
Do a lot of your authors do sort of outlines, or is it stream of
runs
conscious?
The gamut.
Yeah.
It totally runs the gamut. I have one author who always writes the end first, and once she knows what the ending is, starts at the beginning. I think most of them have an outline. Some are much more dedicated to the outline, but some sense of it. And certainly working with me as a first sounding board, we can sort of talk through kind of the beats of the story. I always want to be involved if that's helpful. And I would say most of them, they don't just sit down and sort of say, well, what is my muse going to tell me today?
Well, it's interesting. You were talking about when you were at Kenyon, and you would have those. Right. I don't know if you called them writing groups or what was is that what it was called?
The writing group. Yep.
Yeah, and just having bouncing your ideas off of other people, and I think you do that with your partners too. It sounds like
absolutely.
And then getting with a group of other writers or writers starting out is also an interesting idea. Besides Elisabeth and I being great friends, we also are both married to 2 wonderful men, I think. And Elisabeth's husband, Matt, is truly one of the most wonderful, most hilarious people that I know. In addition to having a wonderful husband, you have 2 wonderful children. How do you balance it all? Balance having the incredibly full and successful career with being a wife and mom?
I'll answer that, but then I want you to answer that.
No, please. I mean,
I think I've given up on trying to be perfect or any sort of, sense of perfection as I age. One of my authors, Jessica Gross, writes the parenting opinion piece at the New York Times, and she is just this voice of calm in all this parenting agita. And she says, you know what, if you're doing it better, if you're doing it well, more than 50% of the time, then you're doing okay. And I really take that adage to heart. And I'll just end on, because I think this is a funny story. It's funny to me. My daughter, a couple of years ago, I was not doing anything well, and I showed up very late to one of her sports games. And she was a little grouchy and mad at me. And she said, all the moms were there, and they brought cookies and donuts. And I think she just saw my face because I had run from work. And she's also a sweetheart and very empathic. And later that night she came in and she said, Mom, I'm sorry I said that about the other moms. She's like, they have rich husbands and they don't work. And I was like, oh, I can be rich donut mom. And so it's become this family joke now where I show up when I can with 3 boxes of donuts, and I'm like, and the kids call me rich donut mom because I was like, I can buy my own damn donuts. And I was like, that was a funny thing where I kind of turned a oops into and so I think you have to have a sense of humor about it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, my response, just when I'm late, I should just say is I'm hanging on by a thread. I'm hanging on by a thread. You've got to help me out here.
And they hear that because sometimes they're hanging on by a thread. Yeah. And I think the more real you can be with them, the more, you just, they don't need to see you as perfect. They know you're not perfect. And so if you can share those moments with them, they get it. So
in closing, because I know you have to go to lunch with You're going to lunch with an editor, you said?
I am going to lunch. Well, I messed up my weekends. I thought I was going to lunch with our new hire. We just hired a wonderful young agent from William Morris. But that's next week. This week I'm going with a young editor. So different. I flip-flopped.
Tell us in passing. So we've got summer's coming up. Any reads that we have, any summer read?
Oh, yes. Let me think. What are the big books that we have coming out? Well, one of my authors just published this great book. It got terrific reviews in the Times and the New York Times and the LA Book Review. It's called The Eden Test by Adam Sternberg. He's also a writer at the Times, opinion editor at the Times, and it's gotten really good advanced praise from Laura Dave and Rumaan Alam, Laura Lippman. That's a thriller. It's been compared to Gillian Flynn. It's got a very kind of Hitchcockian vibe to it. So that's something I'm really excited about. I have a really fun rom-com that came out last week called Love Buzz, which is setting up really nicely. And then I have a great book coming out I have a lot of books coming out this summer, so I want to mention them all, but I don't think I have time. But I have a great book called Summer of Songbirds that's coming out in July by a woman named Christy Harvey Woodson, who's Southern. She's sort of like a Southern Ellen Hildebrand, and she's great. She's great. And I'm actually getting a few of these authors on their tours to come up to Bedford and do events.
Oh, that's great.
Events there, which is great. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy to see you. I really,
thank you for having me.
Appreciate you so much taking the time
of course,
out of your very, very busy schedule to be with us here today. And Elisabeth has her bracelets on the table, which she's going to put back on.
No more clanging.
But thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie. Really fun.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Bye.
A huge thanks again to Elisabeth Weed for joining us. I hope you learned something and had some fun along the way. And as always, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at The Interview with Leslie Heaney. A new podcast is released every Wednesday. And until then, this is Leslie, and don't forget to join The Interview.